The silk of his tie felt cool against my skin, a stark contrast to the heat radiating from his eyes. Kane's gaze, that's where it all started. A single look, a silent promise of a world I'd only dreamed of, and my carefully constructed life began to crumble. 32 years old, and I let a man, my husband's boss, dismantle everything I thought I knew. It wasn't about the money, not entirely. It was about the feeling, the intoxicating rush of being seen, truly seen for the first time in years. It was about escaping the suffocating reality of my life, a life that had become a monotonous loop of bills, chores, and unspoken resentments. My husband, Jeffrey, worked as a mid-level manager at a large tech firm. His boss, Kane, was a titan, a man who commanded attention with his sharp suits and even sharper eyes. Kane was the kind of man who made you feel like you were the most important person in the room, even if you knew you were just another face in the crowd. He exuded power, wealth, and a certain dangerous charm. Jeffrey often came home late, exhausted, complaining about the long hours and the pressure from Kane. He'd talk about Kane's lavish parties, his expensive cars, his vacations to exotic locales. I'd listen, my stomach twisting with a mix of envy and resentment. We lived in a cramped apartment, our furniture was worn, and our date nights consisted of takeout and a movie on a cracked screen. I felt trapped, like I was living in a gilded cage, watching the world go by while I remained stuck in place. Kane, of course, noticed. He'd make small talk when he saw me at company events, complimenting my dress, asking about my day. He'd always linger a little too long, his eyes lingering on mine with a look that made my skin tingle. He'd talk about his travels, his art collection, his wine cellar, painting a picture of a life that was so far removed from my own. One evening, Jeffrey was working late and Kane called. He said he had an extra ticket to a charity dinner and wondered if I'd like to join him. I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest. It felt wrong, but the thought of spending another night alone in my apartment was unbearable. I agreed. The dinner was held at a grand ballroom, the air thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the murmur of hushed conversations. Kane was a perfect host, introducing me to his friends, making me feel like a queen. The food was exquisite, the wine flowed freely, and the music was intoxicating. It was a world of pure indulgence, a world I never knew existed. As the night wore on, Kane's touch became more frequent, his hand brushing against mine, his arm draped casually around my shoulders. He whispered compliments in my ear, telling me how beautiful and intelligent I was. I felt a thrill, a sense of excitement that I hadn't felt in years. It was wrong, I knew it was, but I couldn't resist the pull. He drove me home in his sleek sports car, the city lights blurring past the windows. At my door, he leaned in, his breath warm against my cheek. "You know," he said, his voice low and husky, "you deserve so much more than this." I didn't say anything, but my heart was screaming. He kissed me then, a soft, lingering kiss that sent shivers down my spine. I knew I was playing with fire, but I couldn't bring myself to pull away. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I felt guilty, but I also felt alive, more alive than I had in years. Kane had shown me a glimpse of a world I craved, a world of luxury and excitement. I knew I was playing a dangerous game, but the temptation was too strong to resist. Are you enjoying this story? If you are, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel for more captivating tales. Your support means the world to me, and it helps me bring you more stories like this. Also, if you want more stories like this one, leave a comment down below. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Kane showered me with attention, taking me to exclusive restaurants, buying me expensive gifts. He'd call me during the day, his voice a warm caress on the phone. I felt like I was living a double life, a secret life that was both exhilarating and terrifying. I started to dress differently, to wear makeup that made me feel more confident. I even started going to the gym, wanting to look my best for Kane. Jeffrey noticed the changes, of course. He'd ask me where I was going, who I was talking to, but I'd brush him off, telling him I was just trying to take care of myself. The guilt was always there, a gnawing feeling in the pit of my stomach. But the thrill of the affair was too intoxicating to resist. I was like a moth drawn to a flame, knowing I was going to get burned, but unable to resist the allure. One night, Kane took me to his penthouse apartment, a sprawling space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. We made love on his plush sofa, the city lights twinkling below us. It was passionate, forbidden, and utterly consuming. I felt like I was losing myself in him, like I was becoming someone else entirely. That night, as I lay in his arms, I knew I had crossed a line. There was no turning back. I was in too deep, and I was about to pay a very high price. The affair with Kane became a consuming fire, burning away the remnants of my old life. Every stolen moment, every whispered word, every touch felt like a dangerous indulgence. I was living a fantasy, a secret life that was both exhilarating and terrifying. The expensive gifts piled up, designer handbags, diamond earrings, a silk scarf that felt like liquid against my skin. I reveled in the luxury, the attention, the feeling of being desired. But with each gift, with each stolen hour, the guilt grew heavier. I started to avoid Jeffrey, my excuses becoming more elaborate, my lies more frequent. I'd come home late, smelling of Kane's expensive cologne, my hair still slightly disheveled from our encounters. Jeffrey would look at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of confusion and suspicion, but he never confronted me directly. The tension in our apartment was thick, a suffocating silence that hung in the air. We barely spoke, our conversations reduced to curt exchanges about bills and chores. I could see the hurt in his eyes, the way he'd flinch when I touched him, but I was too caught up in my own world to care. I was like a drug addict, craving the next hit, the next moment of illicit pleasure. One evening, I was at a company gala with Kane, a lavish affair held at a sprawling mansion. We were dancing, the music swirling around us, when I saw her. Tiana. She was tall, elegant, with a sharp, almost predatory beauty. She was Kane's estranged wife. She approached me, her eyes cold and hard. "You're making a mistake," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "Kane will use you, then discard you like he did me. He's a master manipulator, a man who thrives on control." I scoffed, dismissing her warnings as the bitter ramblings of a scorned woman. "You don't know him," I said, my voice laced with defiance. "Oh, I know him better than you ever will," she replied, her eyes flashing. "He'll give you everything you want, then take it all away. He'll make you believe you're special, then leave you broken and alone." Her words rattled me, but I refused to admit it. I was in too deep, too invested in the fantasy Kane had created. I couldn't believe he would betray me, not after everything we'd shared. But Tiana's words lingered in my mind, a dark seed of doubt that began to sprout and grow. I started to see Kane in a different light, to notice the subtle ways he manipulated me, the way he controlled every aspect of our relationship. He'd shower me with gifts, but he'd also isolate me from my friends, making me dependent on him for everything. One night, I went to Kane's penthouse expecting our usual passionate encounter, but he was different, distant, preoccupied. He was on the phone, his voice low and urgent. When he hung up, he turned to me, his eyes cold and hard. "It's over," he said, his voice flat and emotionless. "I'm moving on." I stared at him, my mind reeling. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I mean, I'm done with you," he said, his words cutting like a knife. "It was fun while it lasted, but I have other things to attend to." The world seemed to spin around me. I felt like I was falling, plummeting into an abyss. But, but I thought, I stammered, my voice choked with tears. "You thought wrong," he said, his voice laced with contempt. "You were just a diversion, a way to pass the time. Don't flatter yourself." He walked away, leaving me standing there, broken and humiliated. Tiana's words echoed in my mind, her warnings ringing true. I had been a fool, a naive pawn in Kane's game. I went home, my heart heavy with regret. Jeffrey was waiting for me, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and anger. He didn't say anything, but his silence was deafening. I knew he knew. He had seen the changes in me, the distance, the lies. I broke down, sobbing uncontrollably, confessing everything. I told him about Kane, about the affair, about the lies and the betrayal. Jeffrey listened, his face etched with pain, but he didn't interrupt. When I was finished, he looked at me, his eyes filled with a deep, profound sadness. "I loved you, Helen," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I loved you more than anything." He turned and walked away, leaving me alone in the apartment, the silence broken only by the sound of my own sobs. I had lost everything, my husband, my self-respect, my sense of security. I had traded my life for a fleeting taste of luxury, and I had paid a terrible price. Looking back, I realized how foolish I was. I allowed myself to be seduced by the illusion of wealth and power, to be blinded by the promise of a life I didn't deserve.